Hello, my name's Johnny Wilkins, and today we're going to be talking about the influence of Sir Robert Peel on modern policing. As you'll see, he had quite an immense impact on not only policing in England, but also all the way over in the United States. And a lot of his ideas still hold true today. His earlier years, he was born in Lancashire on February 5th, 1788. He was raised in a wealthy family, and his father was actually a cotton manufacturer. He was schooled at some pretty prestigious schools. Harrow was a private charter school. That was his younger years. And then, obviously, Oxford is a premier Ivy League school. He had some nice schooling. And then early on, he started gaining prominence at quite a young age. He was granted a parliamentary seat as soon as he was old enough to take it, and became very active in government. This is because his father, he was, he had high social standings, and because he was rich and kind of had a lot of say in the area that they were in. And here's just a list of all of the offices he held. As you can see, it's some pretty high-ranking stuff. He was appointed as Prime Minister. He was Home Secretary. Home Secretary is when he did a lot of his like policing work. He was Under Secretary of State for War and Colonies, Chief Secretary to the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland, Leader of the House of Commons, Chancellor of the Exchequer, not sure if I said that right, and the leader of the Conservative Party. So yeah, as you can see right here, he had quite the resume. So back in the earlier days of policing, there were quite a few issues. First of all, police forces lacked integrity and professionalism. They just the police forces weren't professional at all. They were a lot of civilians that either were volunteers or were paid very little. I read somewhere that sometimes they'd be paid 50 cents a night to do a night watch. They were easily bribed, and they consisted of sheriffs, constables, magistrates, and night watchmen. And yeah, like I said, they were often easily bribed, very corrupt. The night watchmen were civilians. Like I said, they were paid very little. And the form of policing that they had in this time and in this area, with the increasing urban growth, just couldn't handle the amounts of people that were coming into the urban areas. People were kind of leaving the more rural areas and coming into the cities, and they couldn't handle all the people. And with the growth of people, you're gonna have a growth of crime, obviously, because people don't get along. So there was a need for new law enforcement policies, and ideas, and more professionalism, and that's kind of where Sir Robert Peel came around. So, like I said earlier, while he was working as Home Secretary is when he did a lot of his law enforcement work. He controlled 9 police departments at this time, including Thames River Police and the Bow Street Patrols, which are a couple of the more famous ones that you may have heard of. And all in all, it was around 450 police officers. But the only issue was this city had about 1.5 million people dwelling in it. So, as you can probably guess, 450 police officers probably isn't a strong enough force for the immense amount of people. And and especially if they're not very professional in the things they do. So Peel was a firm believer in preventative policing as opposed to reactive policing. It was kind of the idea that it was better to prevent crime than to wait for it to occur and then go in and try to kind of clean up after the criminal, try to um, make things better after the crime has already occurred. But that wasn't, reactive policing wasn't really the way to go. Preventative policing is more effective, all in all. So that was something that Peel was thinking about, as you'll see. The London Metropolitan Police was actually brought about by Peel. And in this, he implemented the use of paid professional full-time officers. And he got rid of the citizen watchmen because they were always falling asleep on the job, getting drunk, not professional, like I said earlier. And these guys were known as bobbies or peelers. Bobbies coming from Robert, which can be turned into Bob or Bobby. And then Peel is, peelers coming from his last name. These guys started patrolling regular beats, and you can see them kind of taking the shape of today's modern police officers. They wore uniforms. They were paramilitary in structure and discipline, meaning that they went along with military requirements. And a lot of officers actually made the transition from the battlefield to the streets of London as police officers. And Peel only hired the best candidates. He required them to be at least 5'7" and under 35 years of age. He wanted them to be strong and young and fully able to do their job. Every officer started as a constable and then slowly worked his way up the ranks. And through the implementation of Peel's new policies, the London Metropolitan Police slowly became the model for modern policing, thanks to Robert Peel. So, one of the greater things that Peel is known for is his 9 Peelian principles. So the first principle states that the basic mission for which the police exists is to prevent crime and disorder. This kind of refers back to his basic idea of preventative policing. Peel was a major supporter of the preventative policing model and believed that implementation of police foot patrols and the idea of police officers being out in the community and showing their presence would help deter crime and prevent, overall criminal activity. His second principle was the ability of the police to perform their duties is dependent upon public approval of police actions. This is kind of, just the idea that without the support of society and the community, the police can't effectively do their job. If they're constantly being harassed or, bothered by the citizens. His third principle states that police must secure the willing cooperation of the public and voluntary observance of the law to be able to secure and maintain the respect of the public. The idea that compliance with the law is of extreme importance if there is to be any sense of peace and safety in society. So his fourth principle states that the degree of cooperation of the public that can be secured diminishes proportionately to the necessity of the use of physical force. So basically, the more that law enforcement is required to use force, the less likely the public is to cooperate. They're not going to want to cooperate with the police when they see one officer beating on one of their buddies. His fifth principle states that police seek and preserve public favor not by catering to the public opinion, but by constantly demonstrating absolute impartial service to the law. It's kind of the idea that officers, they need to seek justice just by doing their job and following the law and enforcing the law, rather than worrying about what people think about what they're doing. Can't really worry about or care about what people think. And his sixth principle states that police use physical force to the extent necessary to secure observance of the law or to restore order only when the exercise of persuasion, advice, and warning is found to be insufficient. This is kind of the idea that the use of physical force should be an absolute last resort. First you try to persuade them, then you give them advice on, something else they could do, and then give them a warning, and if they don't follow, then you're going to have to use physical force. His seventh principle states that police at all times, this is actually the most quoted principle of all of his principles. It states that police at all times should maintain a relationship with the public that gives reality to the historic tradition that the police are the public and the public are the police. The police being only members of the public who are paid to give full-time attention to duties which are incumbent on every citizen in the interest of community welfare and existence. It kind of brings a form of policing that is currently used today, actually, and that's community policing. Police need to be out there in the public. They're part of the public, so they need to be out there in the public, kind of, making those connections and, showing their more, human side, I guess. The eighth principle states that police should always direct their action strictly towards their functions and never appear to usurp the powers of the judiciary. Kind of maintains the idea that police are a part of the executive branch, and that being said, they should remain separate from the judicial branch, avoiding any temptation to interfere or tamper with the judicial process. So basically, they're there to tag them and book them, not to sentence them. And then finally, the last one states that the test of police efficiency is the absence of crime and disorder, not the visible evidence of police action in dealing with it. So, this one's pretty clear. It just states that if law enforcement is truly effective, they'll prevent crime rather than wait for crime to occur and deal with it. If they're really doing their job, people are going to see an absence of crime, a lack of crime, rather than the police out there actually, catching them. So there's some biblical thoughts that are based on these principles. First is Romans 13, 2-4. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Do what is good, and you will receive his approval, for he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is a servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. So this is kind of talking about the authorities. If someone's doing bad, they're gonna bring down judgment. And this one goes along with Peele's third principle. And that, just to state again, is the principle that police must secure the will and cooperation of the public in voluntary observance of the law to be able to secure and maintain the respect of the public. And then finally, Proverbs 21:15 states, when justice is done, it brings joy to the righteous, but terror to evildoers. And that's kind of self-explanatory, just kind of along the lines of the good guys aren't going to be scared of justice. That's just the bad guys. And when justice is done, it's going to bring joy, or bring terror to the evildoers. So that's pretty much concludes all of the ideas and implementations brought about by Sir Robert Peel. And as you can see, he had an immense impact on law enforcement in not only England, but also in the United States. Thank you.